Welcome to season 4 of the Vibrational Shift. I am Johanna Olivas, and we are here inside of the Luna Sound Lounge. This is a space where I hold private sessions and Reiki sessions just for you to learn how to come home to yourself. And we're going to dig right into what is happening, what has been happening the last 2 years. I hope that there's a message in here for you, something in here that will resonate with you so that you can maybe make your own decisive action in how to create your own vibrational shift in your life. Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of the Vibrational Shift. This week I have on Amalie. She is an incredible individual and someone that we worked really closely with over the last couple of years as we've been building the foundation of our retreat that happens in Mizata, El Salvador. So I say we because I co-facilitate that retreat with Cindy Lukin, who I recorded with while we were there. So that episode will be coming up in a few weeks as well. So you can hear a little bit more about behind the scenes of what we've been up to with creating different retreat experiences. In this conversation with Amalie, we talk about what brought her to El Salvador. We talk about what she's learned about being on the ground there. And we talk a little bit more about the community aspect of the retreats that we host when we are in El Salvador. And so throughout this episode, you're going to see different prompts and calls to action to go visit and learn more about the fundraising project that we have going on with the Mizata Foundation. I hope that you will contribute and help us meet our goal. Last year, we raised about $2,000 for the local school. This year, we're at about $1,600. So with a little push from you, whether it be $5, $10, whatever you're able to give, we're grateful. The community there is grateful. And so I hope you enjoy this conversation with Amalie. Be sure to head over to the fundraiser and we'll see you on the other side. All right, let's go, Amalie. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Take a seat. So we have Amalie here, who's the director of the Mizata Foundation. And tell us a little bit about the space that we're in right now.
So we're in Casona Tunan, which is the newest addition to the Antiresort family. And it's actually also the place I used to live when I first got here. It used to be a little hostel, and I used to live up there in the corner.
Oh, really? I didn't know it was a hostel before.
It was a hostel before, but like a bit of an abandoned hostel with a lady who lived here with her husband, and now they have a hostel in Playa Dorada. And so I was first up there and then in here, and it was very different. So it's amazing to see the transformation.
Okay. So you obviously are not from Mizata. Can you tell us a little bit about where you started off at? What brought you here? What was the work you were doing before you became the foundation director?
Yeah, cool. I'm from Denmark and I've spent a big part of my life abroad. My parents sent me to boarding school when I was 15 in Thailand. And I think after being a year in Thailand at 15 years old, where I also did a lot of NGO work with a local NGO, I kind of knew that my life was meant to be outside of Denmark. And as I always say, the biggest culture shock was not coming to Thailand, it was coming back to Denmark. I kind of couldn't unsee all the things that I'd seen, I think. And it was very hard being a 16-year-old coming back after a year of seeing so many things and also living so much inequality. And so I think I really came on that mission, which I think with my twin sister, we'd been on it earlier as well, done a lot of social work in Denmark as kids. I think we were always very drawn to help people in need. But I think spending a year in the global south at that age was like, wow, you really realized, like coming from a country like Denmark where you get education for free, after school club for free, university for free. Of course, you pay it through your taxes, but it's accessible for everyone, medical care. And then be on the other side of the world and see like, wow, there's so many people who don't even have like a tenth of all these things.
Mhm.
Running water, electricity, all the things that we take for granted. And somehow I think part of that experience in a way brought me here as well, because I kept searching out for places to do impact in the global south. And when I was 19, I did an internship in Chile in South America and just fell completely in love with Latin America and knew that was here I was meant to be. And so when I ended up in El Salvador 2 years ago and we started working with Josh, the owner of the hotel, to build a foundation, I was like, well, okay, this is what I'm meant to be doing right now. Mhm.
And before you came to El Salvador, where were you? Were you in Copenhagen doing NGO work?
So I went off to the UK to do university and was then meant to go to Latin America to work with NGO work. But because of the pandemic, I was forced to take a job in Denmark and worked in sustainable finance. And I think that was actually very helpful training for a lot of the stuff we do here in terms of working with bigger companies, trying to get them involved in the mission. Yeah, I worked with human rights due diligence, so a lot around how do we make sure that the products we use are sustainable? How do we make sure that there's no child labor in the supply chain and so on? Yeah.
Yeah. So we first met actually when you first came as well. I remember we took that crazy 2 a.m. flight from DC and we landed in Mizata like around 6 a.m. I don't think you must have been traveling in from New York then,
Yeah.
right? And I remember you popped up and I was like, oh, there's someone in the back row of this van. And we drove in, and I think we ended up saying hello to you because you were just volunteering.
Yeah.
And I remember we were planning the first retreat for our group to come, and you're like, oh, maybe I'll see you when you're here. And then you ended up being the person that, essentially hosted us while we were here. And we did a lot of work with you to do a community give back project at the school that's about 10 minutes away from here.
Mm.
I'm curious, in the time from when we saw you, it must have been like in the October timeframe until we came in June.
Hmm.
At what point did it start to feel like, oh, this isn't something I'm just going to stay for a few weeks? I can really sink in and do my work here.
Mm.
When did you feel
That's
like
such
there
a
was
great
that
question.
turning point for yourself?
That's a great question. I think um like, here people would say that the stars really aligned and that I had just, like, decided to come for a few weeks whilst I was gonna look for other jobs in Latin America with human rights, and I was gonna help out with a few retreats, so it wasn't really that I was gonna do NGO work, but, destiny would have it that the English teacher at the English Academy had just left, the week before I got here. So in the first week, they asked, like, "Do you think you could actually help teaching the kids instead of helping that much with retreats?" And I was like, "Yeah, great. I've done a bit of teaching." And then I think through that, just started seeing all the things that we could do together with retreats to help these kids. And then I made friends with a yoga teacher who was working here, and she had a retreat in November. And she was also very passionate about impact and community. And so to her retreat guests, she presented the idea of fundraising for food bags after a big storm and flood, where a lot of the fishermen had lost income for a few weeks.
Hmm.
And we were so overwhelmed. I remember we fundraised like $600, which for us at the time was huge. It was, whoa, are people willing to help out whilst they're on holiday? That's amazing.
Hmm.
And we went off to like the supermarket in San Salvador and bought all the things and made the bags and like distributed them to the community. And I remember some of the staff as well was like filming it because they were like, "Oh, it's amazing that these guys are doing that." And a lot of the Canadian guests, there was a group of 30 people. It was also so cool to see how transformational it was for them. So not just for the community, but also for the guests. A lot of them afterward would say that it was the best experience in their holiday. And so I was like, wow, this is amazing that, like I think we live in such a polarized world, right? Where there's so much negativity and there's so much like, oh, people don't want to help and people don't care. But seeing that, it's like, yeah, people do care and they actually do want to help. They just need to know how and need to be invited in and given the opportunity to help. And it was just so amazing seeing that kind of interaction that I think some of the inequalities between the global north and the global south, right? That in the global north, people have so many resources and so much money, but maybe a lot of people are very unhappy and are looking for a purpose. And here, a lot of people might feel like they have a purpose, but they don't have any resources. And so to be able to connect those groups was like, whoa, we're doing something almost spiritual here, something bigger and kind of like, I don't know. I remember when we were younger in school, they would talk about like world peace and kind of like, well, we're coming onto something here that's so important. And it's not just traditional NGO work where or what traditional NGOs are criticized for, right? Like hand out things and then they leave, but it's actually creating relationships and showing how both sides learn something from it. It's not just the Canadian group that are giving away, but they're also receiving. And
Mhm.
it's also a gift for them to be able to give in a way. And so I think that was like, well, we're onto something here. And some of the guests got involved in a much bigger capacity. Two guests donated $2,000, and we were like, whoa, to do a big Christmas party for the kids. And I remember being like, wow, these kids, like a lot of them don't ever receive Christmas gifts. And so I just feel like I can't leave. I need to help these people to help these people. Like it just felt like if I leave now, as we were starting to uncover this model where people are coming to stay at this amazing resort and can at the same time help a community prosper, I need to be part of that, or I need to help facilitate that,
Mhm.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you touched on something that was really integral to what we were doing or what we wanted to do. And Cindy, the co facilitator on this retreat, she and I had talked about like, we wanted our experience to be different. And I remember we brought it up early on. Is there a way to give back? And I was shocked because I wasn't sure what was going to be said. And when we heard from you all, like, actually, yes, to watch the beautiful sunrises and sunsets in that area, and knowing that for us, not just extracting, but being able to give back, and knowing that, like, almost what you were touching on with, there is there are people out there that have resources. And even if it's not a huge major donor, right? Like
Mm,
when we came, we did a lot of micro donations, and
mm.
we raised, I think, like
Yeah,
$2,000
which
last
is
year
amazing, yeah.
in a short span of time. And, you know, people back at home, like, will ask me, so when I go back, I've had people sending me messages now like, "Oh, I'm so happy you got to do that experience yesterday, or that the children got to come and that they were relaxing alongside you all at the resort." So something that was really important for both Cindy and I was ensuring that the experience wasn't gonna be something that felt extractive
Mm,
to how many times have you gone on a vacation and you've seen the conditions outside of the resort, you know,
mm,
things that are taken from the locals to be able to allow us to have a nice time, was something that I was really mindful about, and that Cindy was really passionate about ensuring, well, why don't we ask?
mm,
Can we do something? And when we had the opportunity to think about, okay, well, we can actually do something with children. And I think as a mother, for me, I have two daughters that are probably similar to the ages of the students that are there.
mm,
It really touched me. I think one of the girls hand wrote a little note, and my heart felt like it just exploded from sadness, but also from joy. And knowing that
mm.
one little experience there may have had an impact, because we had all of the guests. Some of them were playing with the children who still remember Don Ramon, as they call him
Yeah,
to this day.
yeah.
Um, but it was a simple exchange of gratitude from that one student. So, for me, when I see and I recognize that, my parents had the opportunity to leave, in their teens and go to the United States, worked really hard, and that my children, myself and my children, are not that far removed and we have access, why not open up the doors to the people that we interact with to be able to tell them about the work that's being done here? And in yoga, there's always the reminder about being like, we are a part of a collective. And I think that gets lost on so many people, that they
Mm,
are just tunnel vision of like, I need to get through my day, move on to the next thing, and not really think about how we are so
mm,
greatly connected to one another. So I'm really grateful for the work that you all are doing here on the ground. I know that it's hard work. As you've shared with me before in the past, you're coming into a community
mm,
and really building those relationships with
mm.
them. I'm curious, what has been maybe something that shocked you culturally when you arrived over here in the work that you've been doing?
Interesting. I think it shocked me that I did feel a culture shock because when I went to Chile when I was 19, I'd always felt this like huge draw towards Latin America. And there's a Chilean student at exchange at my small school in Denmark, and she invited me to come and live with her. No one spoke English, and I had to learn Spanish in 3 months, and it was the best 3 months of my life. And I felt so much more at home in a country where I didn't even speak the language than I did in my own country. And I was like, what's going on? And as Tata Neto, who's a Sherman, he will always say to me that I was Latin American in my last life, and maybe he's right, but I definitely always felt so much at home here. And so when I came to El Salvador and started also doing this work, I didn't, and maybe I underestimated some of the differences in the things that people have been through, uh, and how it shapes our ability to trust each other, for example. So me coming from Denmark, it may be that in spirit, I resonate much more with Salvadorans than I do with my fellow Danish people. But I've been to Danish school and lived in a Danish system where trust is fundamental for how society works. And um, it just came up on the BBC a few weeks ago that in Denmark they teach empathy classes at school, and like there's a lot around like emotional intelligence and so on. Not that we're so emotionally intelligent, we could be more emotionally intelligent, but I think it's a small country that historically had to work together in order to survive and like avoid invasions from bigger powers. So everything is around collaboration, everything in school is group work, everything is like around partnerships. And so coming here and trying to, for example, make collaborations between schools or get two different community leaders from different communities to work together, and then realizing that like they may never have had to do that before and no one ever taught them how to do that. And especially because of all the violence that people went through here, then you have a community on one side of the river and a community on right the other side of the river, and they hate each other without knowing why.
Mm.
And I think I definitely underestimated that because I think it's not, we were talking to Cindy about it yesterday, that there's not a whole lot of documentaries or information about El Salvador's history. So understanding some of these nuances, I was definitely not aware of that, or the trauma that stays after having been through so much. And it's very interesting, for example, an example with the school that you guys made this amazing library in last year, and we also helped them get toilets and air condition, and we've done a lot of stuff, and it's one of my favorite projects that we do because it's just, as you know, such an engaged school. They have an incredible head teacher who travels 3 hours every day on the bus to come and teach, and it's just an incredible commitment. And as we started working at another school, because we were like, okay, we need to start focusing on some of the other schools as well, then tension started to build between some of the teachers at the different schools. And thankfully, this Friday, we're getting to do a little teacher celebration, which some of you guys might participate in. And it's the first time that we're bringing all the teachers together. And we've done these things a lot also with different community leaders where we talk to the community leaders around like, guys, you actually have more in common than you're different because you all deal with similar issues in your communities and you're all leaders. So you all have to deal with all the tricky things around being a leader, right? And it's been amazing seeing also how doing some of those talks or taking the time to listen to people and also to have the courage to bring people into the same room. When I first started doing that, everyone was saying to me, you're crazy, no one's going to show up. And then you're kind of like, but if this community wants to grow or move ahead, they need to learn to work together. This water project we're working on, it's essential that all the 8 different communities work together because the water supply is going to come from one source.
Mm.
So if they can't work together, they can't get water. And so I've really realized like how fundamental that is, around collaboration and communication. And I felt inspired to, around our English Academy, start thinking about this after school club where there's a space for the kids to come and learn English and music and art, but also maybe have healthy adults to talk to, maybe have a psychologist or social worker who can work through some of the things that
Mm.
they haven't been able to process. And I would love to have a space for adults and even like señores mayores that they could come and process some of these things because people are holding on to so much pain and no one has ever listened to them. And I think right now the focus in the country is so much, and it has been as a foundation too, right? Because you're looking at a community where there's no access to running water, there's no access to sanitation. A lot of people don't get food every day. So all these material things are highest priority. And so you might underestimate the immaterial things, such as like mental health and emotional connection, trust, community building. But those things I'm realizing need to go together
Mhm.
because otherwise you can't make the material things work in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what keeps you inspired to keep doing this? You've been here now for almost 2 years. You've done a lot of different projects. Maybe you can tell us the foundation's mission in your own words,
Great.
and then what keeps you inspired.
I think the foundation's mission is to empower the people of Misada and the community of Misada. It's so important for me to not be um, the kind of NGO that makes people dependent on you, but in a way make people independent from you. That to see how we can help empower people to help themselves. Always thinking that if one day we're not here anymore, hopefully we will keep and have enough funding to continue many years, right? But always thinking about every project as like, if one day we don't have the funding to continue, how is this going to keep going? How
Mhm.
is this initiative sustainable in the long term without us? Um, and how are we making sure that everything we do is something that the community has asked for and something that they want and that they feel ownership over? And I think that's maybe also responds to the next point as to what keeps me going, in that even though some days it's so hard because there's so much, right? And the deeper you go into the community, the more. When I first got here, I didn't know that more than half of the people living in this village didn't have access to running water. It took me quite a long time to figure out because people are incredibly resilient, so they won't go around complaining about that every day because it's been a normal for them, right? And it took me half a year to figure out that most families don't have access to sanitation or toilets in their houses. And when I started realizing those things, I was like, what? What? And coming back to Denmark after being here 9 months last year and then just being like, whoa, it was such a culture shock again coming back to Denmark and being like, whoa, we're really worrying about the wrong kind of things.
Mhm.
When you live in a society where people, it's just becoming normal to not know where to get drinking water from, to not know where to go to the toilet. I couldn't even imagine, and if I say that to some of my friends who've not traveled very much, like, people can't even fathom what that looks like. And then, the stories you hear about mothers with 8 children who've somehow survived on $200 a month, and you're like, "How?" It's just incredible, and so to be able to help these people, um, get more opportunities and know that there is maybe more in store for them as well.
Mhm.
And especially for some of the kids who maybe thought that they were going to be stuck here in Misada for the rest of their lives. And then last year we took them on a field trip to San Salvador. And for many of the kids, it was the first time that left the tunnel that's 5 minutes away from here. And it was just, wow. Imagine like helping these kids expand their world as well. And um, give them hope for a future. And I think I learned that too, and I realized how privileged we are in Denmark that in school they ask us, "What are you dreaming about doing when you grow up?" Or "What do you aspire to do?" And when I asked the kids here, they were like, "What are you even talking about?"
Mm.
Because it's been survival so much, right? And so what does that even mean? What's my dream? What do I want to do? I'm just surviving, kind of. And so I think the longer I'm here and the deeper you dig into some of the inequalities and the issues, the more you're like, whoa, there's so much need. That the need that I saw at the start is just you keep getting an even more profound idea of what that is.
Mhm.
And wanting to see, or even as you guys said, that like seeing that some of the kids are a bit older now and they maybe changed their style since last year, or they
Mhm.
started drawing, or, and it's just, I know for me that how much it meant to have teachers who showed me another path and showed me another direction. And to be able to give that to some of these kids here, I think is very inspiring.
So, something that I think we often hear, people think that they're coming to help a community. And oftentimes we find that the community and that interaction can actually change us. You started to touch a little bit about that. You said you'd been here for 9 months and then you went back home and you realized like how
Mhm.
different everything is. How do you think that by you being here and helping and working in the community that it's changed you?
I think it has definitely transformed me so much. And I think I didn't expect it to, because since I was a little girl, I did a lot of volunteering, also at homeless shelters, and volunteered for 3 months in Tanzania in a very, very poor community when I was 17, alone with a couple of other school friends, and have like spent a lot of time in poor areas in global south and studied development. And so I think it completely took me by surprise how much when you actually spend more time a place as well, instead of when I first got here in my first month or the first few weeks. But the more time you spend and the deeper you get to know people, um, and how you realize things like trust, how much I took that for granted. But that's actually someone in my school who taught me how to have trust towards my classmates, for example. Or something like one thing that we're working with a lot with the community is that there's a tendency to invent a lot of rumors about each other. And I've never realized how much like gossip, for example, can destroy cohesion in a community. And then you realize, whoa, I was lucky to have teachers who were like, guys, don't gossip about each other, or put you aside and like teach you how to work through problems. And so all of those things, or even seeing what it means for a family to live without access to water every day and how they get by. Um, and then, yeah, it's just so different, I think, to any of the other things I've done in the past, because 3 months is quite a long time to get to understand some of the issues. But when you actually live in the community and speak to people every day, it just changes you so much. And I've just realized, and I feel so grateful as well about the schooling I've had and the attention I got at school. And here, as we spoke about yesterday, the kids go to school for 3 hours a day for their whole lives, right? And so they get 3 hours a day with a teacher who has maybe 25 kids. And then they go back into their houses and don't have after school clubs or don't have organized sports initiatives that teach you discipline and values and um, nonviolence and all those things. And so you just start, I become very grateful and also think of, um, and want to help people in that side of the world also realize how much we have and how much with very little we can help people here.
When you think about sustainability beyond it just being a buzzword, what does true sustainability look like
Mm.
to you?
Oh, that's a great question. Um, I think it looks like transformation. It looks like true transformation and ensuring that things are sustainable and well-rounded from start to end. And so when we talk about sustainability in the foundation sense, for example, it also means to implement sustainable initiatives that live in the community beyond us.
Mm.
Instead of, if it was just a buzzword, it would be, okay, we're doing a sustainable project around trash cans. But if we don't teach the community how to use those trash cans, it's actually not very sustainable, because then it's just maybe what they say in Europe, right? Like greenwashing, right? Like putting up trash cans that looks great. But if people have never been taught how to use a trash can, then that initiative is not very sustainable. And so I think we do have specific sustainability initiatives under our sustainable foundation structure too, which is recycling and so on. And it's actually one of the things I feel proudest about, that we've managed to teach the community how to separate plastic bottles from all the other trash, and then sell the plastic bottles. And thankfully, there's a place just 5 minutes away that buys these big bags for $10, which is quite a good
Yeah.
earning for. So it's kind of a, in Denmark, we have a pen system, we call it, where it's a recycling system where you pay a little bit for the bottle and you get the money back afterwards. So you don't see any bottles anywhere because people have this monetary incentive to pick up bottles. And so I was very like, how do we implement that here? And it was funny when we first talked to the community about it. I was like, guys, like, don't start fighting around plastic bottles, right? And people were laughing because everyone had always just thrown plastic bottles in the river and everywhere.
Mhm.
And then now people are actually fighting about the plastic bottles, which I can't figure out whether that's a good thing, because it means that people are picking them up. But yeah. And I think so sustainability for me really means like that it's sustainability 360, and making sure that it's anchored in something local and meaningful as well. And that we think about all of the different ways in which sustainability lives in every single initiative, and also think about the unintended consequences of something we do. Um, and there's so many examples of that. Like, I remember when I studied development at uni, they talk a lot about unintended consequences through development aid, right? Like, how do we make sure that if we come in and help a school that's never received help, how do we make sure that we don't help them so much that they then stop taking initiative?
Mm.
And so sustainability lies somewhere on the line there of like, we want to help them because they don't have clean water, they don't have access to toilets, they don't have a library, they don't have AC. So many things we can do, but how do we do it in a way where we don't take away the agency and the initiative from the amazing teachers who've been making this work the way it is for all those years? And so does that look like that we start working at some other schools and then we come back? Or does it look like that the parents then come down and help with a beach cleanup? Or how do you, and in Spanish you call it contraparte, like what is the community counterpart? I think I've learned a lot here that instead of just coming in and fixing things, then making sure that the community is part of fixing the problem. Because otherwise you end up taking ownership over things that are actually local responsibilities.
Mm.
And so for it to be sustainable work, you have to have that balance, if that makes sense.
It does. And I think within that same vein, what does that then mean from us being responsible tourists too? Like obviously
Mhm.
we want to help. And I think that's why I enjoy partnering with you in particular is because of the philosophy that you have around sustainability of ensuring that
Mm,
you want them to be independent and that you're
mm,
going to create the pathways to be able to make that feasible. But for tourism, I'm just curious, like, what are your thoughts on responsible tourism
mm,
and how tourists that are maybe coming and, they've never stayed at a place that has that kind of direct link into the community?
mm.
What would you say about how we can be better or more responsible tourists coming
Yeah,
to El Salvador?
I mean, I think you guys are great examples, like taking the initiative even before coming and figuring out how can we give back and having that openness and exploring what's already there. And I think having the courage as well to venture out of the resorts. I think it's become somewhere maybe in the 90s or the 2000s, it became kind of normalized for Americans and Europeans to go on holiday on these like
Mega
enclosed
resorts,
mega
yeah.
resorts where you were completely cut off from the real reality outside. and you get to live your American European life, but in a different country that's very different. And I think that structure is not just damaging for the local community, but it's also damaging for us
Mhm.
as like people from the global north, because it's like it prevents us from seeing how life is so different, and also from empathizing when we hear things in the news, like to understand what's actually going on. So I think that's what I love about this resort, that it's so open and the community is right here.
Mhm.
So people, even if they don't leave the resort, they will still get to see the kids who come in and play at the yoga shala, or they'll see the kids fish in the river, or the local mothers washing their clothes by hand in the river. And I'm thinking about so many other resorts I've seen in my life where you just don't get to see that because
They
you
don't
kind of,
want you to.
and they don't
Yeah.
want you to
Yeah.
either. And I think that's one of the things when I first got here, which I thought was so cool about the owner, that he loves when the kids come in and say hi to him on his balcony, right? Like I think that's so unique and exceptional, and I think that's also what really made me wanna stay, right? Because it's like, well, this is people who are doing things differently
Mhm.
and who really want the community to be part of what the hotel is building. And, like, the materials, as you see in Casona Tunan and so on, it's like making something that represents where we are, and not just making a mini Europe or mini US in El Salvador, right? And I think, for people to have like, to not be scared to try. I know that for some people who've never I spoke to a guest who had never done anything with community in her life, and she went on a community walk with me and some other people, and she said to me afterwards, like, "Whoa, that was transformational. I think I'm gonna go back home and quit my job." And I was like, not that it's great she wants to quit her job, but I was kind of like, "That's great," because maybe you're not happy in what you were in, and maybe you had some sort of awakening in the meeting with something that's so different from your everyday bubble. And so I think, like, not being scared to engage. And I know the kids here, we have, I think, some Europeans particularly are very scared to, oh, they don't want to offend, or they don't want to ask too many questions, and so maybe they don't engage, not because they don't want to, but because they're scared of stepping wrongly or saying something or coming across in a certain way.
Mhm.
But the kids here, as you also saw, like, they love meeting people from the outside. When I came here, they'd never met anyone from Europe, and didn't when we were trying I was like, "Where is Europe, guys?" And they had no idea because 'cause they'd only ever heard about the US and Canada. And
Mm.
so kind of seeing it as like it's a way to help the kids as expand their horizon, and for us to expand ours as well. And I think Salvadorians are so generous, and they're so kind in inviting you into their homes and their houses, and I think somehow at some point in our historical development in Europe, we started getting really scared of like receiving those kind of invitations, and like everyone is locked in their own houses. But I think here, when the community invites you in, for tourists to not be scared to take that invitation.
Mhm.
Um and create those shared experiences. And I think in a much bigger picture, as like a global world, we need more of that. We need people to connect from very different backgrounds and circumstances, and for them to realize that at the end of the day, we're all so similar.
Mhm.
And we have so much in common. We just need to find the language to talk about things. And so I actually think sustainable tourism is there's so much writing about that, and there's so much critique of it too. A lot of people say it's like, "Oh, it's a scapegoat," but I actually think it's like it can become one of the routes to world peace, because if we stop traveling, then we just enclose ourselves even more
Mhm.
in our bubbles, right? And we become even further away from what's different to us. So I think it's an incredible transformative concept, actually. Yeah. And I've seen how much it's done here. I mean, with you guys, we built a library that school would never have had a library otherwise, thanks to you guys. And with another group, we built toilets, and they hadn't had new toilets for 30 years, and the kids wouldn't go to the toilet all day because the tank was full. With another group last week, we fundraised for ACs at a school, at a high school. I mean, that's hugely transformational for so many kids, and their learning environment. And I think it was for the guests too.
Hmm. So, just two more questions before we go into the quick ones. What have you learned from living here that you could have never learned from reading headlines about El Salvador?
That's a great question. I think first thing is amazed with how much people have been through and then keep going. The resilience. I keep thinking about like um in Denmark, for example, if someone goes through a divorce or something that's not maybe like hugely traumatic, people don't know how to deal with it. And like completely, and the society haven't taught us how to deal with it. Um, and then people who've been through like the most horrendous things here still keep going and somehow still have hope and still know how to smile and laugh and I think that's been so incredible to see.
Hmm.
And at the same time also then understanding that those traumas live in other ways, for example, as like lack of trust or communities gossiping around each other or fear that comes out in different ways. And so I think there is a lot of talk around, there's this feeling that, okay, the violence has ended. Now El Salvador is this country, but also understanding that there's still a lot of processing to do, I think.
Hmm.
And for us as a foundation, figuring out how can we help do that? Does that look like having social workers or psychologists or even anthropologists doing some of that work, like helping people process what they've been through? Um,
Hmm.
and I think, yeah, I would have never known all these complexities and that if I had not spent so much time here and like been with the community, I think.
Yeah. What gives you hope for the future?
I think the image that comes to me is from this water project that we're working on at the moment with a big donor. When we first started, I was thinking, how are all of these communities going to work together? It's so difficult to get them all in the same room. They start fighting within the first 2 minutes. And I was like, how is this going to work? Because they all receive water from the same area, right? So they need to be in the same directive. And after working with the community for maybe 6 months, they all came together and then seeing some of these community leaders actually like hugging each other. And then I started crying, they started crying, and now I'm almost crying again. Like, just wow, that you're actually able to work through really difficult things and people who've been through so much. There's still a way that we can work without trauma and work with um and heal. And I mean, I think also working with so many amazing people like you guys, yoga retreats and so on, it's sort of in some spiritual way all fits together, right? Like that 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 there is hope and we can change the conditions that we're in, both as individuals and the conditions we were given, but also as a collective. And so I think a lot of us who come from Europe and the US are scared at the moment with everything that's going on and war and so on. But like seeing how you can really transform things here in a small community, things that I wouldn't have thought we would be able to transform in 6 months, gives me so much hope for us as a global world and a global collective that we actually can transform things
Yeah,
and work together, even though it might not seem like it.
I love that. I think I didn't know the last bit of what you just shared about being able to see them hugging one another and that, that this is having a true impact at that other level of embracing one another, embracing that there is deep deep history in terms of what they've faced, but having to work beyond that for the common good. So I absolutely love that you're seeing that transformation happen here.
Mm.
So these are rapid fire questions, very quick. Don't think too hard to see what comes to you first. Beach or city?
Beach.
One thing Denmark and El Salvador surprisingly have in common.
Small countries.
Favorite local food?
Pupusas.
What flavor?
Revueltas? No, loroco.
You like the I
Loroco.
had that this morning for breakfast. It was different.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
different in a.
No, I mean, I enjoyed it. They were delicious. I didn't leave a single drop behind.
Yeah, I love it. Amazing vegetable.
All right. A Salvadorian word or phrase that you've adopted.
Chivo, which
Tell me
means
more.
cool. Which
Okay.
is like, that's cool.
Say it in a sentence.
Qué chivo eso. It's like, that's so cool.
And what is bringing you joy right now?
Having conversations like this, I think is so important for the world.
Yeah. Yes. So the name of the podcast is called The Vibrational Shift. And looking back at your journey, when you think about, where you were a couple years ago, being in Copenhagen and then coming here to El Salvador, what was the moment that everything shifted for you?
It's funny, I was at a cafe with a friend in Oslo where I said to him, I think I need to quit my job. I just don't feel happy. I'm too far away from making an actual impact. And I'm writing all these reports and I'm not sure that I'm actually doing anything. And I said to him, I think I need to go back to Latin America. And he said, well, aren't you a bit too old to keep on like quitting your jobs and then doing something crazy? And I was like, I just feel like I need to go back to Latin America. And I said to him, my dream would be to work in a local community, but through a hotel. And it's so wild to think about that now that I actually said that out loud. And then I said, I'm kind of imagining like a Californian style hotel because they're very open minded and like have a different approach, and in Latin America. And then destiny would have it that when I came here less than a year later, or maybe approximately a year later, the hotel is owned by a Californian who's half Danish. And they wanted to set a foundation working with an NGO in the community. It's like, I didn't believe in the power of manifestation before, but then I was like, whoa, that was a shift. To have actually voiced these things as though they were completely crazy and that can never happen, and have been so specific in what I would like. And then for that to come true in such a specific manner was just pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look at that. That is truly powerful. Like sometimes we say things that may feel crazy in the moment, and then you look back and you're like, everything that I said I wanted is right here, right now.
Mm.
So I want to thank you for sharing your story with the listeners and for the work and the impact that the foundation's having. I don't know if you realize how many people know about the foundation, even if they haven't donated yet. I talk about it every class that I teach, every big workshop that I'm doing, because for me, community is really important. It's important that we don't forget that we are part of a collective, a global community, that everyone has the ability to impact someone else. And even no matter what people are going through at home, that even $5, $10, $20, like all of it makes a difference. And, I've had people who have been like, oh, that's right, you're going, like, here, let me give you money. Literally, I was at a barbecue right before I came, and someone who actually I ran into here because she's from El Salvador and was not expecting to see her. I think I may have told you when I was here on one of my visits, my first visit, ran into her, and I saw her actually again the weekend before I came here this week. And she was like, here, put this in for whatever you end up getting for the children. And so people are hearing about it. I think they're really inspired by the work that's being done locally here on the ground. So let that be something that hopefully you hang on to, is that your work is not being done in vain, even when you're in the thick of it from day to day, like where it feels like you're in the weeds and down, getting dirty with the community of like, there's so many different things for you to tackle. Like There is a whole group of folks back at where we live that are fully aware of the work that you're doing, that are cheering the work on, and really do believe in the mission that you all have established here in the local community. Because I think it gives us hope as, first generation, second generation people that are from Latin America, and knowing that there is a way to go back, enjoy the land, and still give back as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you for all the work you guys do. You were, the first people I met and the bus when I got here. So I also think there is something like a higher meaning around that. And now we've met 4 times in person here, and you were one of the very first groups to really believe in the work. We didn't even really have a foundation established at the time. It was kind of like, okay, we're trying to do something. And you just believed in it and trusted us with the $2,000 that you had fundraised. I think that's also like amazing that you had that trust in us so early on, and the kids always remember you guys as one of the first groups that came up. And it makes me so happy every time I see the library, and also, to have people who cheer on elsewhere when things feels like when you're so close to the problems, sometimes it feels difficult to see that, oh, we're actually achieving a lot and a lot of things have happened, and um maybe the community trusts each other so much more now than they did last year, but how do you measure that? And so sometimes when you're in the thick of it, as you say, you might not see the progress. So to have people from the outside come back and say like, whoa, look at all the things you've done, it means a lot. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right.
All
That's it. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode. If you are moved and would love to help support us in what we're doing here on the ground in Mizata, please feel free to head over to our GoFundMe fundraiser. We are so close to reaching our goal, and there's still so much more to do. I hope you'll join us for the next episode, where I interview Cindy to talk a little bit more about the experience of creating this retreat. Breaking news, so Luna 2027, the retreat, the next iteration in El Salvador, had already sold out. I hadn't even been home for 2 days and the spot's completely filled up. However, we do have a wait list. There are a few availabilities that we might be able to get. So if you think you want to join us, make sure to visit this website and get on the wait list. And if you are local to the East Coast and you want to join me, I also have a one-day women's retreat coming up in August with one of my mentors. Her name's Vanessa Cordonu, and it's going to be a women's one-day retreat. And then in October, I have a women's multi-day retreat with 3 other co-facilitators, where we are going to be diving into the directions to help guide us how to come home to ourselves. And guess what? These other facilitators are also sound healing practitioners. You don't want to miss it. If this sounds like something of interest, make sure to head over to lunaserenity.com, and I will see you on the next episode.